Hey, horror fans! Before we trek into the icy unknown, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment with your city and the time you're watching. This helps YouTube share more terrifying tales like these. Tonight, we're plunging into 9 true Alaskan horror stories, straight from the chilling depths of Reddit and beyond. From ghostly whispers in the tundra to shadows that stalk frozen lakes, these accounts from hikers, hunters, and campers will make you question what's lurking in the wilderness. So grab a blanket, dim the lights, and brace yourself, because the Alaskan wild is watching, and it's closer than you think. Let's dive in.
Story number 1. The Tundra's Whispering. The summer of 2024, a hiker named Kara, known on Reddit as Arctic Wanderer, set out on a solo trek into the heart of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This vast, untouched wilderness, where the tundra stretches endlessly under a sky that never fully darkens, was her escape from the noise of the world. Equipped with a sturdy backpack, a small tent, and a digital recorder to document her journey, Kara felt ready to conquer the isolation. She had no idea what the tundra had in store. On her third night, Kara pitched her tent beside a frozen river, its glassy surface reflecting the pale twilight. The air was crisp, the silence profound, broken only by the occasional crack of shifting ice as she settled into her sleeping bag, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep. A strange sound stirred her awake. It was faint at first, like a breeze carrying secret, soft, unintelligible whispers weaving through the fabric of her tent. At first, she thought it was the wind playing tricks, but the whispers grew clearer, almost human, though she couldn't make out the words. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, curling around her like a cold fog, heart racing. Kara grabbed her recorder, hoping to capture the sound for proof. The whispers continued, low and rhythmic, as if chanting in a language older than time. She whispered into the recorder, "It's midnight. I hear voices. I'm alone out here." Then, a new sound froze her blood, the slow, deliberate scrape of her tent's zipper. It inched upward, stopping halfway, as if someone or something was testing it. She clutched her flashlight, too terrified to move, and shone it toward the entrance. Nothing. No shadow, no figure. Just the open tundra, staring back through the half-unzipped flap. She didn't sleep that night. When dawn finally painted the sky in hues of gray and gold, Kara stepped outside, her breath visible in the frigid air. That's when she saw it. Her boots, which she'd left just inside the tent, were now arranged in a perfect circle about 10 feet away, half buried in fresh snow. No footprints led to or from the circle. The snow around her camp was pristine, undisturbed, as if the boots had been placed there by the wind itself. Her stomach churned as she realized the whispers had stopped the moment she stepped outside. Kara packed up quickly, her hands trembling as she stuffed her gear into her backpack. She played back the recorder, and the whispers were there, faint but unmistakable, layered with her own shaky voice. But there was something else, a low, guttural hum she didn't remember hearing. It sent chills down her spine, and she shut it off, vowing not to listen again until she was far from the tundra. When she reached a small village, days later, she shared her story with a group of locals at a general store. Their faces grew solemn, and an elder woman leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "The tundra speaks," she said, her voice low. "It chooses who it talks to, those who hear it. Sometimes they don't come back." She spoke of ancient stories, of spirits tied to the land, restless and watchful, who guard the wilderness from those who linger too long. The boots, she said, were a warning, a sign to leave before the tundra claimed her. Kara posted her experience on Reddit under the username Arctic Wanderer, hoping for answers. Some users suggested hallucinations from exhaustion or the eerie acoustics of the tundra. Others shared similar stories of whispers and strange signs in the Alaskan wild. Kara kept the recording but refused to share it online. "I'm scared of what might happen if I play it again," she wrote. "It feels like something's listening." To this day, Kara avoids solo trips. She still has the recorder locked away in a drawer, untouched. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she swears she hears a faint whisper calling her back to the tundra. Story number 2. The Phantom Sledding. The winter of 2023. Jake, a seasoned musher from Fairbanks, Alaska, shared a chilling experience on a sledding forum that left readers frozen in their tracks. Known for his toughness and love for the open trails, Jake had been running sled dogs for over a decade, navigating the rugged Chena River Valley with his team of huskies. But this particular night run, under a sky heavy with stars and a biting wind, would haunt him forever. It was late January, and Jake set out with his 8-dog team for a routine training run along a familiar trail. The snow crunched beneath the sled's runners, and the dog's breath puffed like clouds in the frigid air. The valley was silent, save for the rhythmic panting of the huskies and the soft jingle of their harnesses. About an hour into the run, as they rounded a bend near a frozen creek, the dogs stopped dead in their tracks. Their ears pricked up, and low growls rumbled from their throats, their eyes fixed on something in the distance. Jake squinted into the darkness, his headlamp cutting through the shadows. There, about 200 yards ahead, was a figure, a dark silhouette, pulling a sled, gliding silently across the snow. It moved with an unnatural grace, too smooth for the uneven terrain. Jake called out, thinking it was another musher, but there was no response. The figure kept moving, its sled leaving no tracks in the fresh powder. His dogs whimpered, refusing to budge, their fur bristling as if sensing something Jake couldn't. Gripping the sled's handlebar, Jake urged his team forward, curiosity overriding his unease. As they closed the distance, the figure seemed to flicker like a shadow caught in a strobe light. Then, in an instant, it vanished, figure, sled, and all, leaving only the empty trail ahead. Jake's heart pounded as he scanned the snow, expecting to see tracks or some sign of the stranger. Nothing. The snow was pristine, untouched, except for his own dog's paw prints. Shaken, he decided to turn back, but as he signaled the team to pivot, he noticed something glinting in the snow 100 yards away. He approached cautiously and found his lead dog's collar unbuckled, lying neatly in the snow, still warm to the touch as if it had just been removed. Jake's blood ran cold. The collar had been securely fastened when they started the run, and his lead dog, a loyal husky named Coda, was still harnessed, unharmed but visibly spooked. How the collar ended up so far from the sled, perfectly placed with no footprints around it, was a mystery Jake couldn't explain. Back in Fairbanks, Jake shared his story at a local tavern, where old mushers and trappers gathered. One grizzled man, his face weathered by years in the wild, leaned in close. "You saw the phantom sled," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He spoke of a trapper who perished in a brutal 1920s blizzard, lost in the Chena Valley with his sled and supplies. Legend has it, his spirit still roams the trails, pulling a ghostly sled, searching for the home he never reached. Those who see him, the old man warned, are marked by the land, and strange things follow. Jake posted his experience online, hoping for rational explanations. Some suggested optical illusions from the snow, or exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. Others shared eerie tales of their own mushers, who'd seen fleeting figures, or found gear misplaced in impossible ways. Jake couldn't shake the image of that silent sled, or the warmth of Coda's collar in his hand. He still runs his dogs, but he avoids that stretch of the Chena Valley at night, and Coda's new collar stays double-checked before every run. Story number 3. The Lights over Denali. the spring of 2024. A Reddit user known as Peak Pulse shared a harrowing tale from a climbing expedition in Alaska's Denali National Park. The group of 4 experienced mountaineers, Alex, Mia, Sam, and the storyteller, Chris, set out to tackle Denali, North America's tallest peak. A 20,310-foot giant, cloaked in ice and mystery. They were prepared for brutal weather, avalanches, and altitude challenges, but nothing could have readied them for what they encountered at 14,000 feet. The team had set up camp at the 14,000-foot basin, a windswept plateau surrounded by jagged peaks and glaciers that shimmered under the faint Alaskan twilight. The air was thin, the cold biting, and the silence almost oppressive, broken only by the creak of ice and the occasional gust howling through the cliffs. On their second night at camp, as they huddled in their tents, sipping hot tea to stave off the chill, Mia noticed something strange through the tent's small window. "Guys, look at the sky," she whispered, her voice tight with unease. They crawled out into the freezing night, their breath forming clouds in the beam of their headlamps. Above them, the sky was alive, not with the familiar shimmer of the aurora borealis, but with something far stranger. Green orbs, pulsing like heartbeats, darted erratically across the heavens. They weren't stars or satellites. They moved too fast, too unpredictably, weaving patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Some hovered, others zipped out of sight, leaving faint trails of light that lingered like after-image. Chris estimated there were at least a dozen, glowing with an otherworldly intensity that made his skin crawl as the group watched. Mesmerized and uneasy, their radio used to check in with base camp crackled to life, unprompted. Static hissed through the speaker, then gave way to faint, distorted whispers. At first it was gibberish, a garbled mess of sound, but then, clear as day, the radio whispered their names: Alex, Mia, Sam, Chris. The voice was low, almost mechanical, with a cadence that didn't sound human. The team froze, staring at the radio in horror. Sam lunged to turn it off, but the whispers continued even after he yanked the batteries out. The orbs above pulsed brighter, as if responding to the sound. Terrified, the group retreated to their tents, zipping them tight and agreeing to stay awake until dawn. No one spoke, but the air was thick with fear. Chris clutched his ice axe, his knuckles white, listening for any sound beyond the wind. Hours later, as the first light of dawn crept over the peaks, they emerged to find something even more unsettling. Their ice axes, which they'd secured inside their tents, were now arranged outside in a perfect star shape, their tips buried in the snow. The snow around the formation was untouched, no footprints, no drag marks, just the axes gleaming in the pale light. When they descended to base camp days later, shaken but unharmed, they reported the incident to the park rangers. The rangers, hardened by years on the mountain, dismissed it as altitude sickness or hypoxia playing tricks on their minds. "Happens all the time up there," one said, shrugging. But when Chris shared the story with a local guide in Takitna, the man's expression darkened. He spoke of sky spirits, ancient entities said to guard Denali's slopes. According to legend, they appear as lights to watch climbers, testing their resolve. Those who see them are marked, and the mountain doesn't always let them go unscathed. The guide pointed to the star-shaped axes. "That's their sign," he said. "You were warned to leave." Chris posted the story on Reddit under peak, including a grainy photo of the axe formation snapped before they broke camp. The post sparked heated debates. Some users blamed optical illusions or electromagnetic interference from the mountain's minerals, while others shared tales of similar lights and whispers on Denali. One commenter, claiming to be a former ranger, said they'd found abandoned gear arranged in strange patterns over the years, always at high altitudes, always unexplained. The team never climbed Denali again. Chris keeps the photo of the axes, but he avoids looking at it for too long. Sometimes, on clear nights, he glances at the sky and wonders if those orbs are still watching. waiting for him to return to the mountain that never forgets. Story number 4. The Frozen Hand in the winter of 2025. A hunter named Tom shared a bone-chilling experience on a Reddit thread that left readers questioning the safety of Alaska's wilds. Tom, an experienced outdoorsman from Juneau, had ventured into the Tungus's National Forest, a dense, misty wilderness of towering spruce and hemlock, to track elk during a rare clear spell in January. Armed with his rifle, a GPS, and a backpack of supplies, he felt at home in the forest's quiet embrace. But what he found deep in the snow would unravel his sense of security and haunt him for months. Tom had been hiking for hours, following faint elk tracks through a secluded valley where the trees grew so thick they blocked out much of the pale winter sun. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and frost, and the only sounds were the crunch of his boots and the occasional snap of a branch under snow. As he crested a small ridge, something caught his eye, a pale shape protruding from a snowbank, stark against the white. He approached cautiously, his breath catching as he realized what it was. A human hand, frozen solid, reaching out of the snow as if grasping for help. Its fingers were curled, the skin unnaturally blue but perfectly preserved, with no signs of decay or animal interference. Tom's heart pounded. He knelt to examine it, noting the hand's delicate features, a slender wrist, neatly trimmed nails, and a faint scar across the knuckles. It looked as if it had been frozen moments ago, yet the snow around it was undisturbed, with no tracks or signs of a struggle. Shaken, he marked the spot with a bright orange ribbon tied to a nearby tree, and used his GPS to pinpoint the location. He decided to head back to his truck, a 3-hour trek, to report the find to the rangers. As he hiked, the forest seemed to close in around him, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier, as if the trees themselves were watching. When Tom returned, with 2 rangers, the next morning, the snowbank was empty. The hand was gone, leaving only smooth, untouched snow where it had been. The orange ribbon still fluttered on the tree, and the GPS coordinates matched perfectly, but there was no trace of the hand or any disturbance in the snow. The rangers exchanged skeptical glances, suggesting Tom might have mistaken a branch or animal remains for a hand in the dim light. But Tom was adamant he'd seen it clearly, felt its eerie presence. Frustrated, he parted ways with the rangers and set up camp nearby, determined to search again the next day. That night, alone in his tent, Tom couldn't shake the image of the hand. He barely slept, kept awake by the wind's mournful howl through the forest. Around 2 a.m., a new sound jolted him upright, a slow, deliberate scratching on the tent's fabric, like claws dragging across the surface. He grabbed his flashlight and rifle, shouting into the darkness, but the scratching stopped. When he unzipped the tent and shone the light outside, he found long, claw-like marks etched into the tent's outer layer, too deep to be from any small animal. The snow around the tent was pristine, with no tracks leading to or from it. His blood ran cold as he realized something had been there, circling his tent, and it hadn't left a single footprint. The next morning, Tom packed up and left the Tunguses, vowing never to hunt that valley again. Back in Juneau, he shared his story at a local bar, where an elderly Tlingit woman overheard him. She pulled him aside, her eyes sharp with concern. "The forest keeps its secrets," she said. "Those who disrespect it by taking too much or lingering where they shouldn't don't always stay buried." That hand was a warning. She spoke of spirits tied to the land, restless and protective, who guard the Tunguses from intruders. The claw marks, she added, were a sign that Tom had been noticed and spared. For now, Tom posted his story on Reddit, hoping for answers, or others with similar experiences. Some users suggested he'd seen a frozen animal limb or hallucinated from exhaustion, but others shared eerie tales of objects vanishing in the Tunguses or unexplained scratches appearing on gear. One commenter, claiming to be a former ranger, mentioned finding abandoned campsites with strange markings, always in that same valley, always unexplained. Tom kept the tent, its claw-like tears a grim reminder, but he hasn't returned to the forest. Sometimes, in the quiet of his home, he swears he hears a faint scratching, like something still searching for him in the dark. Story number 5. The glacier's echo in the summer of 2023. A kayaker named Lily shared a haunting experience from Alaska's Kenai Fjords National Park on a wilderness forum, a tale that sent shivers through its readers. Lily, an avid adventurer from Anchorage, had planned a solo kayaking trip along the icy waters of the fjords, where towering glaciers meet the sea in a breathtaking clash of blue and white. Armed with her kayak, a compass, and a waterproof journal to document the journey, she was ready for the solitude and beauty of the remote coastline. But what she encountered near a glacier would make her question the line between nature and something far more sinister. On her second day, Lily paddled through a narrow inlet, the water mirror smooth and flanked by cliffs that glistened with frost. Above her loomed a massive glacier, its jagged face creaking and groaning as it calved small icebergs into the sea. The air was sharp with the scent of salt and ice, and the only sounds were the rhythmic dip of her paddle and the occasional thunder of falling ice. As she neared the glacier's base, where the water turned a surreal turquoise, she called out a playful hello. To test the echo, a habit she'd picked up on past trips. The sound bounced back, crisp and clear until it didn't. The echo that returned wasn't her voice. It was distorted, stretched into a high-pitched scream that seemed to claw its way out of the glacier itself. Lily froze, her paddle hovering above the water, her heart hammering in her chest. She called out again, softer this time, "Is anyone there?" The response was immediate, a warped, wailing mimicry of her words, layered with a guttural undertone that made her skin prickle. She glanced around, expecting to see another kayaker or a prankster on the shore. But the inlet was empty, the cliffs silent except for that unearthly echo dot as she tried to steady her nerves. Her compass began to spin wildly, its needle jerking in circles despite the calm waters. Then, her kayak started to drift not with the current, but toward the glacier, as if pulled by an invisible force. The water remained still, no ripples or waves to explain the movement. Panic rising, Lily paddled hard against the drift, her arms burning with effort, but the kayak inched closer to the ice, where dark cracks gaped like open mouths. She whispered to herself, "This isn't real, this isn't real," but the echo mocked her, twisting her words into a low, mocking chant. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the drift stopped, and her compass settled. Shaken, Lily paddled furiously to shore, dragging her kayak onto a rocky beach flanked by jagged cliffs. As she caught her breath, she noticed something carved into a nearby rock, her name. Lily, etched in fresh, jagged lines, the cuts so new they gleamed in the sunlight. Her journal, still tucked in her dry bag, had no mention of her name being written anywhere. Her blood ran cold as she realized the carving was too precise, too deliberate, to be a coincidence. When Lily reported the incident to park staff at a ranger station, they brushed it off as a prank, suggesting local teens sometimes carved names to mess with tourists. But an elderly Tlingit man at the station, overhearing her story, pulled her aside. His face was grave as he spoke of a glacier spirit, known to the locals as the voice of the ice. It mimics the voices of those who venture too close, luring them into the cold depths with echoes and tricks. The carving of her name, he said, was a marca claimed by the spirit, warning her to stay away. "You're lucky you left when you did," he added. "Some don't." Lily shared her story online, hoping to find others who'd experienced something similar. Her post, accompanied by a photo of the carved rock, sparked a flurry of responses. Some dismissed it as imagination fueled by isolation, while others shared tales of compasses failing or voices echoing in the fjords, always near glaciers. One user, claiming to be a former park employee, mentioned finding kayaks abandoned near that inlet, their owners never located, with strange carvings on nearby rocks. Lily hasn't returned to Kenai Fjord since. She keeps the photo of the rock, but it stays locked in a drawer alongside her journal. On quiet nights, when the wind howls outside her Anchorage home, she swears she hears a faint, echoous scream, or maybe her name, calling her back to the glacier that knows her by name. Story number 6. The Shadow on the Ice. In the winter of 2024, a Reddit user known as Frostbite Nomad posted a chilling account of an ice fishing trip on Lake Clark, a remote glacier-fed lake in Alaska's wilderness. The poster, a seasoned angler named Ethan, had ventured out alone to one of his favorite spots, a frozen expanse surrounded by snow-draped mountains and dense forests. With his ice auger, fishing gear, and a propane lantern to ward off the early dusk, Ethan was prepared for a peaceful day on the ice. But what unfolded that evening would leave him questioning whether he was ever truly alone. Ethan arrived at Lake Clark just after noon, the sky a heavy gray that promised more snow. He trekked across the frozen lake, his boots crunching through the crust, until he reached a spot far from shore where the fish were known to bite. The air was still, the silence so profound it seemed to hum, broken only by the rhythmic drilling of his auger as he bored a hole through the thick ice. He set up his gear, dropped a line, and settled in with his lantern casting a warm glow across the frozen surface. 4 hours, it was just him, the lake, and the occasional tug of a fish, the kind of solitude he craved. As dusk fell, the temperature plummeted, and the sky darkened to an inky blue. Ethan was about to pack up when he noticed something. A tall, shadowy figure, standing on the ice, about 50 yards away, near the edge of his lantern's light. It was humanoid, but unnaturally thin, its edges blurred as if it were part of the twilight itself. Ethan blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light or a distant tree. But the figure moved, gliding silently in a slow circle around his fishing hole. His heart raced as he realized there were no footprints trailing behind it. No crunch of snow, no sound at all. "Anyone out there?" Ethan called, his voice swallowed by the vastness of the lake. The figure didn't respond, continuing its eerie orbit, always just beyond the lantern's full reach. He grabbed his flashlight and swept the beam across the ice, but the shadow seemed to absorb the light, its form flickering like a bad signal. Then, without warning, his lantern flickered out, plunging him into near darkness. A low hum filled the air like distant chanting, growing louder and more rhythmic, vibrating through the ice beneath his feet. Ethan's breath caught as he felt the hum in his chest, unnatural and invasive, as if it were trying to speak through him. He scrambled to relight the lantern, his hands shaking, but the flame wouldn't catch. The shadow stopped circling, now standing motionless directly across the fishing hole, its featureless form towering against the faint starlight. Ethan couldn't see eyes, but he felt watched, pinned by an unseen gaze that made his skin crawl. He grabbed his gear, ready to bolt, when the humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. The shadow vanished, as if it had never been there, leaving only the empty ice and the soft lapping of water in the fishing hole. Ethan didn't wait for it to return. He packed his gear in a frenzy and trudged back to shore, his flashlight beam darting nervously across the lake. When he reached his truck, he locked the doors and drove straight home. The memory of that shadow burned into his mind. The next morning, he returned to retrieve a forgotten tackle box, hoping daylight would erase his fear. But when he reached the fishing hole, he found his line left dangling in the water, tangled into a perfect, intricate knot, so tight it was impossible to undo. The ice around the hole was smooth, with no signs of the shadow or any other presence. When Ethan shared his story with locals in a nearby village, an old fisherman nodded knowingly. "You met the lake walker," he said, his voice low. "He spoke of a spirit that haunts frozen lakes, a lonely entity that appears as a shadow to those who linger too long on the ice. It seeks company, the fisherman warned, and those it visits often find their gear altered or hear its hum in their dreams. The knotted line, he said, was a reminder that the lake had claimed Ethan's presence. If only for a moment. Ethan posted his experience on Reddit under Frostbite Nomad, including a photo of the impossibly knotted fishing line. The post drew a mix of skepticism and eerie corroboration. Some users suggested he'd seen a mirage caused by cold air, while others shared stories of shadows on Alaskan lakes, always silent, always leaving strange signs. One commenter, claiming to be a local guide, mentioned finding abandoned fishing gear on Lake Clark, arranged in patterns no human could explain. Ethan still fishes, but never alone, and never on Lake Clark. He keeps the knotted line in a box, a relic he can't bring himself to untangle. On cold nights, when the wind is still, he sometimes hears a faint hum, like a chant carried across the ice, calling him back to the lake that never forgets its visitors. Story number 7. The Cabin in the Storming the Winter of 2024. A hiker named Ryan shared a spine-chilling experience from Alaska's Chugach Mountains on a Reddit thread that left readers gripped with unease. Ryan, an experienced outdoorsman from Anchorage, had set out for a multi-day trek through the rugged, snow-laden peaks, seeking solitude and the thrill of conquering the wild. Equipped with a sturdy backpack, a weatherproof tent, and a map of the trails, he was no stranger to the challenges of Alaska's backcountry. But a sudden blizzard and an impossible discovery would turn his adventure into a nightmare he'd never forget. Ryan had been hiking for 2 days, navigating the Chugach's steep ridges and frozen valleys under a sky heavy with the threat of snow. On the third afternoon, the weather turned vicious. A blizzard roared in, with howling winds and snow so thick it reduced visibility to mere feet. Ryan knew he couldn't make it to his planned campsite, so he trudged through the storm, his face stung by icy pellets, searching for shelter. As the light faded and the cold seeped into his bones, he spotted a faint glow through the swirling, small cabin, its windows flickering with the warm light of a fire. Relief washed over him as he approached the cabin, a simple wooden structure nestled in a clearing, its chimney puffing smoke into the storm. The door was unlocked, creaking open to reveal a cozy interior, a crackling fire in a stone hearth, a wooden table with a steaming mug of coffee, and a single chair pulled up as if waiting for him. The air smelled of pine and roasted beans, and the warmth was a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. But something felt off. There were no signs of anyone else. No footprints in the snow leading to the cabin, and no gear or personal items to suggest an occupant. The coffee mug was hot to the touch, as if poured moments ago, yet the cabin was silent, save for the fire's soft pops. Ryan called out, "Hello, anyone here?" His voice echoed in the small space, unanswered. Grateful but uneasy, he sat by the fire, sipping the coffee, which was rich and perfectly brewed. He checked his map, puzzled. The Chugach trail maps showed no cabins in this area, not even old hunting shacks. As he warmed his hands, a low knocking sound began, faint at first, coming from the walls. It grew louder, more insistent, like fists pounding from within the wood itself. Ryan froze, his eyes darting to the walls, which seemed to vibrate with each knock. He shouted again, "Who's there?" But the knocking only intensified, rhythmic and relentless, as if something trapped inside was trying to get out. Fear overtook his gratitude. Ryan grabbed his pack, bolted for the door, and stumbled back into the blizzard. The storm's roar drowned out the knocking, but as he glanced back, the cabin's windows were dark, the chimney smokeless, as if the fire had never been lit. He ran, the snow swallowing his tracks, until he found a rocky outcrop to pitch his tent and wait out the storm. When the blizzard cleared at dawn, he retraced his steps, determined to confirm what he'd seen. But the clearing was empty. No cabin, no chimney, no signs of smoke or footprints, just unbroken snow and silent trees. His map still showed no structures in the area, and his GPS marked the spot as a featureless expanse. Exhausted and shaken, Ryan made it back to civilization and reported the incident to Chugach State Park rangers. They listened politely, but insisted no cabins existed in that part of the mountains. "Maybe you found an old trapper's shack," one suggested, but Ryan knew it wasn't old the fire. The coffee, the knocking were too real, too immediate. At a local diner, he shared his story with a group of regulars, and an elderly woman, her hands gnarled from years in the wild, leaned in close. "You found the storm haven?" she whispered. She spoke of a legend among Chugach hikers, a spectral cabin that appears in blizzards, offering shelter to the lost. But those who stay too long hear the knocking spirits of those who accepted the haven's warmth and were never seen again. Ryan posted his experience on Reddit, hoping for answers. His detailed account, under the username Chugactricker, included a photo of his map with the circled location, now just a blank spot in the snow. The post sparked debates. Users suggested hypothermia-induced hallucinations, while others shared tales of mysterious shelters in the Alaskan wild, always vanishing by morning. One commenter, claiming to be a retired ranger, mentioned finding abandoned gear in the Chugach, sometimes with coffee mugs, still warm, always in places no cabin should be. Ryan hasn't hiked the Chugach since. He keeps the map, the circled spot, a reminder of that impossible night, on stormy evenings, when the wind howls outside his Anchorage home. He swears he hears faint knocking, like something or someone still waiting for him to return to the haven that never was. Story number 8. The Raven's Warning. In the summer of 2025, a camper named Sarah posted a haunting experience from Alaska's Wrangell St. Elias National Park on a wilderness forum, a tale that left readers gripped with unease. Sarah, a nature photographer from Fairbanks, had planned a week-long camping trip with two friends, Emma and Nate, to capture the park's rugged beauty, towering peaks, sprawling glaciers, and forests that seemed to whisper secrets. Equipped with cameras, camping gear, and a detailed map, they were ready for adventure. But an eerie encounter with ravens and an inexplicable discovery would make them question whether they were ever alone in the vast wilderness. The trio set up camp in a remote valley, where the McCarthy Road faded into a maze of spruce and birch. The air was crisp, scented with pine and damp earth, and the sky stretched wide, dotted with stars as night fell. On their second day, as they hiked toward a glacier viewpoint, Sarah noticed ravens, dozens of them circling above their group, their glossy black wings slicing through the air. Their caws were sharp and incessant, not the usual chatter of birds, but a rhythmic, almost urgent call that set her nerves on edge. Emma, a biologist, shrugged it off as territorial behavior, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the ravens were watching them, their dark eyes glinting with unnatural intensity. That night, back at camp, the ravens didn't leave. They perched in the trees surrounding the campsite, their silhouettes stark against the twilight. As Sarah cooked dinner over a small fire, one raven landed on a branch just above her tent, staring directly at her. Its eyes seemed to glow, catching the firelight in a way that made her skin crawl. "It's just a bird," Nate said, laughing. But his voice wavered when the raven let out a low, guttural croak that sounded almost human. The other ravens joined in, their calls blending into a cacophony that echoed through the valley, drowning out the crackle of the fire. Sarah barely slept, the ravens cawing a constant backdrop to her uneasy dreams. At dawn, she woke to silence. The birds were gone. Relieved, she stepped out to start coffee, only to freeze in her tracks. Their food supplies, stored in bear-proof containers, were scattered across the campsite in a perfect spiral pattern, the cans and packets untouched by teeth or claws. The ground showed no paw prints or signs of animals, just the eerie arrangement of their provisions. Emma and Nate were as baffled as Sarah, their faces pale as they surveyed the scene. No bear could do this, Emma whispered. No animal could. Determined to press on, the group hiked deeper into the park, but the ravens returned, following them from above. Their shadows flickered across the trail, and their calls grew more aggressive, like warnings shouted in a language they couldn't understand. By the third night, camped near a rushing river, the ravens were relentless, perching closer, their eyes fixed on the group. Sarah's camera, left on a tripod to capture a time-lapse of the stars, caught a single frame of a raven staring directly into the lens, its eyes glowing an unnatural red. When she reviewed the footage, her stomach churned. The raven's gaze felt personal, as if it knew her. The next morning, as they packed to leave, Sarah noticed something carved into a nearby tree, a crude spiral, mirroring the pattern of their scattered food, with fresh sap oozing from the cuts. None of them had a knife sharp enough to make such precise marks, and the tree had been unmarked the day before. Shaken, they cut their trip short and hiked back to their vehicle, the ravens trailing them until they reached the road. As they drove away, Sarah glanced back to see a single raven perched on a signpost, watching them go. Back in McCarthy, Sarah shared her story with a native guide, a quiet man named Elias, who'd lived near the park his whole life. His expression grew somber as he listened. "The ravens see everything," he said. "They're messengers for the Dark Watcher, a spirit that claims parts of Wrangell St. Elias." He explained that the Watcher marks those it wants to follow, using ravens to warn or taunt. The spiral, he said, was its sign, a claim on those who ventured too deep into its domain. "You were lucky to leave," he added. "Some see the ravens and never come back." Sarah posted her story online under the username Shudderwild, including the chilling photo of the raven's glowing eyes and a sketch of the spiral carving. The post sparked a flood of responses. Some dismissed the ravens as curious birds, while others shared tales of similar encounters in the park. Food rearranged, carvings appearing, and ravens that seemed to know too much. One user, claiming to be a former park volunteer, mentioned finding campsites abandoned with spiral patterns in the dirt, always in that same valley. Sarah still photographs Alaska's wilderness, but she avoids Wrangell St. Elias. She keeps the raven photo, though she rarely looks at it, and the spiral sketch stays tucked away in her journal. On quiet nights, when the wind carries the distant caw of a bird, she feels a chill, as if the Dark Watcher's ravens are still watching, waiting for her to step back into their domain. Story number 9. The tracks that vanished in the winter of 2023. A Reddit user known as Stalkerak shared a terrifying experience from a solo ski trip in Alaska's gates of the Arctic National Park, a remote wilderness where the tundra meets jagged peaks under an endless sky. The poster, a backcountry skier named Mark, was no stranger to the Arctic's harsh beauty. With his skis, a lightweight pack, and a satellite phone for emergencies, he set out to explore a rarely traveled valley, craving the solitude of the frozen north. But what he encountered in the snow would leave him shaken, questioning whether the land itself wanted him gone. Mark had been skiing for 2 days, gliding through a landscape of untouched powder and stark, windswept ridges. The air was crisp, the silence profound, broken only by the soft hiss of his skis and the occasional howl of wind across the tundra. On the third day, as he traversed a wide, open valley under a sky heavy with gray clouds, he noticed something unusual: fresh human tracks in the deep snow, crisp and clear, as if made hours ago. The prints were large, suggesting heavy boots, and they stretched in a straight line toward a distant ridge. Puzzled, Mark scanned the horizon. No other skiers, no camps, no signs of life in the vast emptiness. Gates of the Arctic was remote, and he hadn't expected to encounter anyone this far out. Curious, but cautious, Mark followed the tracks, assuming they might lead to another adventurer or a research outpost he hadn't known about. The prints were oddly precise, evenly spaced, with no scuffs or stumbles, as if the person had moved with unnatural purpose. After an hour, the tracks stopped abruptly at the base of a rocky outcrop, vanishing without a trace. No camp, no turn, no sign of ascent or descent. The snow beyond was pristine, untouched by even the wind. Mark's stomach churned as he realized no one could disappear like that, not in deep powder, not without leaving some mark. Unsettled, he decided to camp nearby, pitching his tent in the shelter of the outcrop as dusk painted the sky in shades of violet and gray. The silence of the Arctic felt heavier now, oppressive, as if the valley were holding its breath. Around midnight, Mark woke to a violent shaking. His tent shuddered, the fabric rippling as if gripped by unseen hands. He bolted upright, grabbing his flashlight and knife, shouting into the darkness, "Who's out there?" The shaking stopped, but no one answered. Heart pounding, he unzipped the tent and shone the light across the snow. Nothing, no footprints, no shadows, just the empty tundra staring back. At first light, Mark inspected the area, expecting to find some explanation: a fallen branch, an animal, anything. But the snow around his tent was undisturbed, save for a single, chilling discovery. The word "leave" scratched into the snow near his tent, the letters jagged and deep, as if carved with a sharp tool. The tracks he'd followed the day before were gone, erased by some impossible force, leaving only smooth powder where they'd been. Mark's blood ran cold. He hadn't heard wind or seen fresh snow in the night, and the word "leave" felt like a command, personal and urgent. He packed up in a frenzy, skiing back toward the trailhead as fast as his legs could carry him. The valley seemed to watch him, the air thick with an unspoken presence. When he reached a ranger station days later, he shared his story, showing a photo he'd snapped of the scratched word before fleeing. The rangers listened, their faces unreadable, and suggested wind patterns or exhaustion might explain the vanishing tracks. But one ranger, after the others left, leaned in and whispered, "You're not the first." He spoke of other skiers and hikers who'd found tracks in gates of the Arctic that led nowhere, sometimes followed by strange signs, carvings, rearranged gear, or whispers in the wind. "The land," he said, "doesn't always welcome intruders." Mark posted his experience on Reddit under Snowstalker Rack, including the photo of the word "leave" etched in the snow. The post exploded with comments. Some users blamed hallucinations from the Arctic's isolation, while others shared eerie tales of tracks vanishing or messages appearing in the park's remotest corners. One commenter, claiming to be a Yupik elder, wrote that the tundra has its own will, rejecting those who linger too long. The word "leave," they said, was a warning from the land itself, and ignoring it could mean disappearing into the snow, erased like the tracks. Mark hasn't returned to gates of the Arctic. He keeps the photo of the snow-carved word, but he avoids looking at it, the memory of that shaking tent too vivid. On quiet nights in his Fairbanks home, when the wind carries the faint moan of the Arctic, he feels a chill, as if the valley is still watching, waiting to see if he'll dare to cross its boundaries again.